Good day, viewers. Welcome to a fresh edition of 30 Minutes with me, Manir Dan Ali. Our guest today is a veteran of the Economic Community of West African States, that is ECOWAS. I'm talking about Mallam Haruna Warkani, who spent over 20 years working in that body, which is currently facing its biggest challenge since its inception 49 years ago. That is the body that was set up in 1975, the month of May to be precise, is now for the first time facing the challenge of the actual exits of 3 of its member states. I'm talking about Niger Republic, Mali, and Burkina Faso. And a recent meeting here in Abuja, that is a summit of the heads of states of what remained of ECOWAS, have just agreed that the process will continue from January 29th, and they are kind of giving a grace of just 6 months. Mallam Haruna Warkani, do we expect a miracle to happen within 6 months? I mean, this is an issue that has dragged on for a year since these states called up the bluff of ECOWAS and say they are quitting. Do we expect a miracle to happen within 6 months?
Well, very much unexpected. I think that's the summary. Very much unexpected, because the reasons why this group of states took this rather unfortunate decision are so fundamental to their own existence, such that reversing this might also be very, very difficult.
Because they have dug into their position, they have made much of their career since they took over power in their respective states. Definitely. On this kind of, we are done with ECOWAS.
If you notice very carefully, you will see that it took them time to take that decision. When they reeled out their first communique as a group, the communique was so comprehensive, so deep, and very vast, covering the fundamental issues of existentialism that affect these countries beyond just the ethics or the precepts or whatever you could say of ECOWAS as a bloc. It touches on their sovereignty, and therefore it became something that for them it's a matter of life and death.
But why should it be that? Because this isn't the first time that ECOWAS has experienced coups, and then the ECOWAS protocol has kicked in with member states being suspended and all of that. Why was their own so special? Or is there some additional factors that made this to happen?
Very well. There were pre-existing situations that obviously gave rise to what we have seen. One of them is the insecurity that has been very pervasive, very persistent, and has seemed to have defied all logic of a solution. That's first and foremost. This insecurity had affected the civil population. It has affected the military as an institution
in their respective countries.
Yes, and these military institutions saw that the democratic governments in those respective states were not responding to the needs of the military. These are fundamental issues that sometimes might be brushed away by just mere looking at or analyzing some of these factors. It also became obvious that the role of France as the colonial master in all this mix or nexus of security, insecurity, good governance, social development, and some other factors became too obvious that not much was really being achieved. Yet, France has maintained military bases in these countries in the context or pretext of providing security, which did not come by any means whatsoever.
But it's now more than a year since all these military regimes are in place, the last of which is in Niger.
Yeah.
Not much has changed.
Yes, we probably would assume that not much has changed. But I think on the ground, there are definitely some changes. These changes might not seem obvious, but they are clear that the military are once, for the first time, in charge themselves. They are dictating the pace.
But they haven't secured their citizens, because we see even more vicious attacks in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and even in Niger itself, where even recently lots of their soldiers were killed in an ambush.
Very well, is expected. Expected because these new military governments are actually up against some factors that hitherto might not be there. For instance, the long hands of France is still very obvious. The insurgents or jihadists that we have also gained some notoriety and sophistication. And there are outside influences that are also increasing as a result of some of the potentials of these countries. So you see, the situation is so dynamic that what we had before may not necessarily be what we are dealing with today.
But still, to come back to the issue of the involvement of the French,
yes,
their soldiers have been expelled from these countries. So why are we still talking of France and its tentacles?
Yes, very well. You see, a country like France, surely for any sovereign francophone country to say, get out of our jurisdiction from so date, you will expect a backlash, which is what these countries are harvesting right now. It is the backlash. They are physical, direct, and they are subtle and very overt backlash that is coming. And don't forget, a country like Burkina and even Niger, to an extent, there had been some attempts to remove these military governments through some coups. All those things are what these military are now facing vis-a-vis the containment of the insecurity in such a way that they are having to deal with multiple challenges at the same time. And what we can say is social dynamics have changed, because the support and confidence of the civil population has so increased such that people are now more with the government than they used to be. And this might not be obvious to people, but you see, citizens are happier that for the first time they are actually independent. That is to say, despite flag independence that may have been given to these countries around 1960s, truly, none of the Francophone countries have ever been independent.
That is because they still have some umbilical tie to France. They have physical soldiers, and even their currencies are tied to the French monetary authorities. Is that what
in the case of France, really is even beyond all this, because here you have a country that will tell you the compact for colonial agreements to grant you independence included clauses in that agreement where the country has no right to issue or award contracts, public contracts, to any company that France has not pre-selected. So obviously, in most of the countries you see, non-French companies might not bid and get any job to do.
So this is like the second independence of these countries.
In fact, that is the true independence for these countries.
Is that why we see even Chad joining, Chad which is not in ECOWAS, because they've also recently sent the French soldiers back in?
In fact, we are seeing the second wave of anti-French actions. More are coming. Chad has just done. Senegal has told them to also leave. Gabon has given notice for France to leave. Outside of Africa, or West Africa in particular, you have some countries that have decided too that they are giving France a quit notice.
But who is like pulling the strings in all this? Because surely it won't just be happening naturally, especially given the way some of them quickly jumped to another master.
No, well, we will deal with the issue of the second master or alternate master. But beside it, the social milieu of what has been happening in these countries actually would have been the first trigger. People are so unhappy with the way France has been managing these territories, because I won't call them countries per se, because for you not to exercise all or enjoy all the elements of sovereignty, currency, military, foreign affairs, and the rest of them still tied to somebody. Incidentally, a country like Cote d'Ivoire, very strangely, they still pay rent to France for their state house. The official residence of the president of Cote d'Ivoire is on rent to Cote d'Ivoire.
Is that fact or fiction?
No, fact. Fact.
How come? Under what circumstance will that be possible?
Well, they'll tell you it is the French that built the place.
Yes, but they've also gained a lot which they've taken to their own countries.
They really don't care. The plundering of Africa by France has been so monumental. If you remove Belgium in Africa and perhaps a little of the Germans when they had the opportunity before the World War, you will see that French have been one of the worst colonial masters ever, because the policies have been so disgusting.
So if we go back to our main issue, this ECOWAS exit by these three countries, you are making the case that the continued insecurity with bandits, militants, and what have you is one of the reasons that these countries feel that they may as well leave ECOWAS, send French packing and what have you. What of Nigeria? There hasn't been any ease up in terms of the militancy, in terms of the banditry here. In fact, recently we have even a new element, the Lakurawas that we've been told have been around. It's just that we haven't been talking about them. So if in the former French colonies, this issue is being blamed on France being the instigator, what about in Nigeria?
Well, Nigeria is classified in French foreign policy as the neighbor you cannot avoid. That's the official description of who Nigeria is according to the French foreign policy document. Now, they regard Nigeria as one of them, the colonies, without necessarily being physically here. Today, there are more French companies than even British in Nigeria, if you discount Shell. The French have found a way to survive in so many ways here in Nigeria for obvious reasons that sometimes you begin to ask the question, what is really going on? And because of their interest, having been surrounded by Francophone countries as a nation, they regard us as one of them, but with scorn, because they don't still believe we should have actually been, because we might be a replacement of France in West Africa, assuming Nigeria played its role very well in the sub-region, economically, politically, diplomatically, etc.
Is that why France, and the French president are now cozying up to the Nigerian president, Bola Tinubu? He's been invited to a very lavish state visit and all of that, and he seems to be swooning on their shoulders.
In fact, it's one of the, would we say, rather unfortunate developments for us as a nation, because our neighbors, very good neighbors for that matter, cannot be kicking out France, and we are rather opening up to the same country. I think it brings to question the integrity of Nigeria in this matter beyond belief, because if you recall, recently, the president of Chad expressed his displeasure with the way Nigeria has been handling the multinational joint task force in the areas of theater of war in the Lake Chad region.
And the common body for Niger, Nigeria, and Cameroon
exactly to fight Boko Haram and yes. The other insurgents. You know, for a president of a country to say he is quite frustrated because he saw clearly that Nigeria seems to be, by body language, rather supporting the Boko Haram and through France. And that led him to take this drastic decision to say France must leave his country. It is unprecedented for any Francophone president of any country to be able to wake up and say, France, leave. Let us remember how when France was asked to remove his ambassador in Niger, and France says, I don't even recognize your government, and I will not remove the ambassador. The ambassador remains here. That is to say, even when the country has declared the ambassador persona non grata diplomatically, the diplomat remained there physically.
But eventually he had to leave.
Yes, that was the power of people. You could see what the society's reaction was. Very clear, very decisive. The man had no choice than to leave in a very disgraceful manner. Now, when they pulled the embassy out, they simply flew to Chad and they had a refuge for some time. Now, all the soldiers that have been asked to leave with the military base have been camped in Chad, but you can see not quite months after, the whole thing has turned around to say, even in Chad, you are also not welcome.
But they are welcome in Nigeria.
Now Nigeria is saying, come, we have a space for you.
I would like us to go on a short break and resume the conversation thereafter.
Thank you.
Viewers, it is 30 minutes, the interactive program of Trust Television, and our guest today is Mallam Haruna Warkani, a retired director at ECOWAS, who's been unpacking the recent drama of the exit of 3 of the member states from the body. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, it is 30 minutes, the interactive program of Trust Television, and our guest today is a veteran of ECOWAS, Mallam Haruna Warkani. What could have informed this position of the current administration? Are you suggesting some have earlier actually come out in a written petition earlier this year? Some professors and notable Nigerians, including Professor Attahiru Jega, Professor Jibo Ibrahim, and some other civil liberties people, to say that don't allow France to set up a base in Nigeria. Is that still something serious? Is it not just in the realm of some people's imagination?
I don't think so. I don't think so. To me, it's like we have gone beyond this realm. We have probably surpassed anybody's expectation. It will maybe be a matter of time. It will become obvious that yes, probably France already has a military base here in Nigeria, and the dangers of this would have been quite obvious.
But would that be possible for Nigerians not to know, including Nigerian military that don't seem to be welcoming to any foreign force in Nigeria?
Well, I think these are very difficult scenarios because the military might have their way, but I don't think they have their say right now.
They are not consulted, you mean, over this matter, and that is why we see the Chief of Defense Staff making some not so welcoming remarks about any foreign military presence. You could clearly see the body language is already jittery, that perhaps many more things might be happening, because it's just like, I think the characteristics of this government has shown that, okay, when they say they are not doing,
That's exactly what they are doing.
But the last time a military chief challenged a president over this kind of decision, that is General Victor Malu, during the Obasanjo presidency, he got more or less sacked.
Yeah, well, sacking would be a normal thing, because if you disagree with your boss, yes, obviously it could be the end result, but it does not remove the fact that as a nation, we need to be cautious of some of these things, because from rumors to reality, or even perception, which in most cases, perception seems to be stronger than reality itself. And therefore, the government needs to be very clear on this. If truly it wants to distance itself, that is not what it is trying to do, then let it be known very, very clearly by demonstration that truly the French are not having an inroad into Nigeria to set up a military base. Because I tell you, the consequences of doing that is such that, imagine a scenario where you lose your sovereignty over any territory given out to such a country.
But if we look at what was signed in public when the president visited, we saw more of business people signing some agreements, some MOUs. We also heard that there's something to do with mineral exploitation. That is what seemed to be the obvious thing. Where is all this fear and concern about possible French military base coming from?
Well, thank you so much. Military base or military agreements are hardly public documents. Not ever. They are usually shrouded in secrecy, very top secrecy. They are never disclosed, not between any country that we all know. I mean, it's not France alone. All the military powers around the world have signed all these kind of agreements with people, and they have to look for a cover. And this cover comes in the form of what you have just described. Economic agreements, trade, bilateral relationships, some cultural, some things that are sometimes even too insignificant for a country to consider. But beneath the layer of all that is the actual thing. And so military agreements are there that, you see, some of these countries that are kicking out France, for instance, are so happy that they are finally relieved. If you were to pass through, let's say, a typical country like Senegal, and you visit the French military base by the sea, you will surely regret that why did this country ever grant this kind of right to France? Because you see the soldiers come in and go out at will, do whatever they want. Nobody is accountable. They can't be arrested. They can't be prosecuted because they belong to a military base. Is that what we probably will be looking for in Nigeria? No. I know Nigerians as far back as year 2000 or thereabout have resisted America's intent then to establish the CENTCOM, Central Command in Africa, here in Nigeria.
Well, much earlier at independence, Nigerian students kicked against the Anglo-Nigeria Defense Pact. That is, even after granting Nigeria independence, Britain wanted some kind of military pact, but it was rejected.
Very good. You see, in those days when we were students, let's say, the student movement was very vibrant. And I know we had reasons to shape foreign policy in this country in a way that people were not seen to be quiet. They challenge the powers that be in such a way that whether you like it or not, some things must happen. Now, today, it seems like politicking has withered down the capacity of students to actually be the conscience of society, such that they are literally quiet. The only time you find maybe body of students coming forward would be to do a hatchet work of maybe promoting someone or a political party or a particular interest that may be okay for them for now, more or less of stomach infrastructure.
Since it doesn't look like anything will change within this 6-month grace that the body of the heads of states has given the three countries. How do you see the region? That is, this advantage we've had of like one block of more than 5 million square kilometers, more than 400 million people is now being balkanized. What prospects do we have in West Africa, or do you see it maybe even breaking down further?
Well, it's unfortunate. Surely it will break further, and we must bear in mind that there may be new candidates for the Sahel states.
That is these three African countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, who form the Sahel group. Some others may join them.
They may have new members coming to join them. And so the balkanization is what has been keeping ECOWAS so jittery all this while, because some of the fundamental reasons we have said created this division in the first place is even growing.
But it's been mishandled, because many people will say, if better handled, maybe these countries wouldn't have exited.
Oh yes, it was badly handled, not just mishandled, badly handled, because some of the precipitate actions that ECOWAS itself as a body took were totally unnecessary. Yes, there was a military coup. Yes, there are some prescribed sanctions that normally the organization has to place. But when you become into overdrive, and there was obvious feeling or tendency to say it must happen like this and what have you. See, ECOWAS made great mistakes in the first place, because most of these countries, the elections were flawed, and therefore the selection of leadership in itself fundamentally created the first problem. Second, even those that were sworn in as new democrats in countries, there was bad governance. ECOWAS did nothing towards all those things. So now, waiting for a military coup to occur before you now come in as a reaction, I think has been the greatest undoing of ECOWAS, which is still also continuing, because right now there are countries that, if you discount Ghana, so many other countries have problems that shouldn't have been there. Benin Republic, Togo.
So it's quite a testy time for the sub-region, for ECOWAS, and for the people of the region.
Definitely. We will, that's why I said there are more candidates for the AES coming, because in all these places you have problems that are simmering, let's say, under the carpet. Cote d'Ivoire is not very far from where it is or where it should be in this regard, because all the turmoil that happened during Gbagbo's era of coup and counter-coup, democracy or no democracy, election or no election, are still simmering, because those were the challenges to France fundamentally within that country. And the government found a way to silence everybody, even took the man to the ICC
and all those things. And now his wife is going to contest.
Very good. So you see, there are old wounds that are still there that might be opened up. And when they do open up, it might result into something that nobody probably can contain in West Africa. Now, if ECOWAS as a body fails to contain this, the resultant effect will always be to say, okay, we said it, the body is not superintending itself properly over this block. And therefore, these countries have no good reason to even think of coming back.
Very good point to end this interesting conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming onto the program.
Thank you for having me, and thank you, viewers.
Viewers, that's the end of this edition of 30 Minutes. Keep a date with us.